Welcome to another episode of the Faces of Newquay podcast, and today we're speaking to Dave from St Petrocs. He tells us about their amazing work trying to help support people who are living on the street. He also talks a lot about addiction and some of the other issues that are associated with homelessness. It's a fascinating talk. I loved it and I really hope you enjoy it. Right, so let's get started.
Yeah.
So I'm here with Dave Brown, who's the spokesperson for St Petrocs.
Indeed.
And I guess we're going to cover what St Petrocs is doing in Cornwall and specifically Newquay. And hopefully, I'm really interested to hear all the kind of experience that you've had around people living on the street in Newquay. Do you want to just fill us in maybe on your role within St Petrocs?
Yeah. Well, I've worked for St Petrocs for, I don't know where to look. So you see first edit coming up. I've worked for St Petrocs for near on 13 years.
Yeah.
I've managed the houses that we run, including the one in Newquay. I've worked as an outreach worker, and although Newquay was never part of my patch, I've covered in the area. I've worked in resettlement, which is the word that we use to describe the offices where people can come in and they can have a shower and use the phone, see a doctor and get rehoused, where we work with people to get rehoused. I've worked the most years I did with St Petrocs was as a young person's worker, and I worked with people aged between 16 and 25, and again including people living in Newquay. I've lived in Newquay for 22 years, and I'm quite passionate about the town and about looking after it and the people in it. More recently, I've managed the resettlement services, and then at some strange point last year, they asked me to be a communications manager. All of a sudden, I was taken away from actually working with.
Now you're doing podcasts.
I'm doing podcasts
on a Friday morning.
So that's all a bit surreal.
So St Petrocs as a whole, their kind of mission statement is to end homelessness in Cornwall.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think you touched on a few different roles there that, personally, I'd like to know a bit more about. So the first thing you did was run the houses, or a house.
Yeah.
What happens at these houses and how do they help?
Well, we now have 89 bed spaces, and they're peppered throughout Cornwall. Let me think. In Newquay, we've got a house which is a 6-bedroom house. It's been in the news that we're hoping to open one not far from where we're sitting now in Elliott Gardens.
Okay.
I think that's it. And so they're by and large they're fairly small houses, and they're ordinary houses in the middle of an ordinary street. We do our best to be a good neighbour. If one of the residents is playing his music a bit loud and the neighbour rings up and says, "Can you get him to turn it down?" That's what we do. And by and large, certainly when we opened up, when we were talking about opening the Elliott Gardens house recently, we had someone who lived next door to us in a current house which has been there for at least 20 years, and wanted to put her point of view across and say that we were a good neighbour to her, and that she would recommend us being next door.
Are they long-term solutions, or is it quite a large turnover of people coming in, doing a month or two, and then?
It's not a great turnover. There used to be a 6-month time limit on people's stay. It's chopped and changed over the years, and we're a lot more flexible about how long People can stay in the houses. The one in Newquay has still got a 6-month limit on. If someone's doing really well and, it's going to take them an extra 2 months to move on, then it would be completely ridiculous to force them out at the 6-month limit. So we don't do that.
Yeah.
There is a low turnover in the house, I would say, of people, and the idea is that it's, you're trying to get the most out of people. So anything that people are really good at, you're trying to get them to be doing that, and that makes them feel better about themselves, and it can create opportunities for them. Anything that they're not very good at, you're trying to address with them so they can improve on their life.
Yeah. Is there someone at each of the houses?
Yeah,
to help, rehabilitate or whatever.
Yeah, the house we've got in Newquay now, there's a lady called Sue who works there, and she's what we call a supported accommodation manager. And we like, everybody likes to come up with these role names now, don't they?
It's a pretty impressive one.
And her role is to work with the 6 people in the house, and there's official support plans put in place which we can refer to, and if Sue goes off sick, then somebody else can go in and they can see exactly what's going on with that person. But the personal relationship with the people in the house is I believe the most important thing going on. And it doesn't matter if you're going to sit there for half an hour and talk about the weather and what a nice day it is, or what you're going to be doing later. And it's a nice conversation, then you're doing a good job. And then, you're building trust and you're developing that professional relationship with that person.
So if someone is on the street now, how do they go from there to one of these houses?
There are a myriad of routes. And it would depend on who they are and what they're up to. So somebody could appear on the streets in Newquay, in the next 5 minutes, and they may contact us themselves to say, I've just been, chucked out by my mum, or I've been asked to leave by my landlady. Or I've left because my landlady sucks, or I've just arrived in Newquay and I'm homeless. So if they don't phone us themselves, then they could be referred to us by someone from the council who's become aware of them because they've gone into the council office. They could have come via DISC, which is a voluntary agency in town run by a lady called Monique. It could be a StreetLink referral, so people can phone a telephone number and phone StreetLink, which is a national homelessness service, and StreetLink could have told us about that person. And then an outreach worker will go and see said person on the streets. That's probably going to involve sitting down with that person for a couple of hours, hopefully with a cup of tea or coffee. It may be they might be sitting in the passenger seat of your car. You might be in a cafe somewhere. You might be in a church or a community centre, and you're going to be finding all about that person. Now, if that person is, without any major issues, we get a lot of people coming through, and it's sort of, everybody wants to talk about addiction and everybody wants to talk about alcohol, but we do get a lot of people coming through who don't have those issues. They are literally just homeless,
right.
And it's just happened to them, and they're frightened. They're very frightened because they've seen all the publicity. They're frightened that they're going to have to sleep on the streets tonight. They're frightened they're going to get beaten up. They're frightened that they're going to become an addict because they've read in the newspapers for the last 20 or 30 years of their life that homeless people become addicts. So they're frightened of all sorts of things. And those people are very easy to help. They will take your suggestions on board. You never force anybody to do anything. You never go, right, you've got to come with me. I found a house for you in Birmingham, because that's just not fair. But if generally what I tended to do was, I would talk through the options with that person. I maybe even listed those options out on a piece of paper, and we'd gone, right, do you want to go with this option? Do you prefer that option?
Yeah. I think that was one quite an interesting point that I found. Some people kind of felt like, say they had a coffee or some food or something like that, they'd give it to someone who was on the street, regardless of whether they, like that food or not, and they kind of expect that because they're in a bad situation, they should just be grateful for whatever they get. Whereas actually, it's probably, the guy might not, or girl might not like an egg sandwich. And I think that kind of mindset does travel all the way up the line of, really you should be respecting how they feel and what they're into and what their choice would like to be. Like you said, they might not want to move to Birmingham.
Yeah. I've never offered anywhere in Birmingham.
Yeah.
Unless they're from Birmingham.
Yeah.
If someone's just arrived from Birmingham, then they are going to be quite vulnerable. There are people everywhere. It doesn't matter where you go in England. And we always talk about England when we talk about homelessness. We don't talk about the UK. There are different laws in Wales and Scotland regarding housing.
Okay.
Most research and what we do is concentrated on England. St Petrocs only work in Cornwall, but Cornwall is in England, although that's up for debate in some places. That you land somewhere that you're not used to, where you don't know anybody, you are vulnerable. You're vulnerable to crime from people who live in the area who might be, wanting to prey on people who are vulnerable. It doesn't matter where you are. There's people who are going to be a threat to someone who's new in a town, and it's not as safe for them to be in a strange town as it is to be in their own town. So the primary option, and one which we're quite assertive about, really, is that if somebody's from another town in the UK, then we'll try and get them back there. Okay. Now, we don't just buy railway tickets for people and send them back on a one-way ticket, because you might be landing them in a bigger pile of trouble than they were in to start with. You've got to make sure that they're not vulnerable in that place, and you've got to make sure that there's going to be a roof over their head where they're going. So it can involve quite a lot of telephone conversations to people in that place. You're going to be phoning homelessness agencies in that place, and there's no uniform way that homelessness is dealt with throughout the whole of the UK or England. So that you've got to work out what the homelessness services do in a particular place. And you might, on the suggestion of the client, be phoning friends or relations of them. And you've got to secure at least 4 weeks worth of accommodation. It's not long, is it, really? But you've got to secure at least 4 weeks worth of accommodation for someone before you can send them back there. But they will be safer there, and they'll have their support network around them. And there is a big emphasis on doing that. And we've sent people back to, we had some chap from Thailand. He's English, but he'd lived in Thailand for 20 years. And he came back here because his health was failing, but England said no. And he had no recourse to public funds here in the UK. And after a few days of research, he elected of his own accord to go back to Thailand. And we were able to pay for a ticket for him back to Thailand. We can reclaim that money off of Westminster via Coastline Housing. But we've sent people back to Eastern Europe and South Africa and all over the
How
place.
many people would you say St Petrocs deals with on a weekly basis? Or
Last year we dealt with 1,038 people.
wow!
So if you can divide that by 52,
is that mainly quite quick fixes? Or?
Well, yes, I would say the majority of that 1,000 people are going to be quick fixes. Some of them won't. Some of them will be people who've got a fortnight left in their accommodation and are phoning us up because they're worried they're going to be homeless, and we're able to work with them to prevent their homelessness. Some of them will be in temporary accommodation already provided to them by someone else, like the council or another agency. And they again, they're coming to us because they feel, or the agency that they're already with feels that we might be better for them than they are. We would do the same in reverse as well if we felt that someone might be better off with coastline housing because they wanted to be in a particular area. Then we would ask Coastline if they would take them, and we would do a referral to them. So lots of those people aren't sleeping rough. In fact, I would say, probably half of them aren't sleeping rough. They are people who are worried they're going to sleep rough, and we're working with them to stop that from happening. So there's an incredible amount of stuff going on. It's a big.
And it's probably quite overlooked because most people focus on the kind of visceral problem that you see on the street rather than something of a more preventative measure, like just stopping that rough sleeping from happening by finding them accommodation beforehand.
Under law, you're homeless if you haven't got anywhere to live, if you haven't got a permanent address. If you're staying on your mate's sofa, then you're not on the streets, but you are legally homeless. We get a heck of a lot of sofa surfers. People who are staying with one mate for a fortnight and another mate for another week, and then their auntie for 3 days, and then they're back to the first mate again, and they're dancing from one house to another in a very, very tenuous way. And we would take people like that into our supported accommodation, as well as people who've come directly off the streets. So it's better to do that than it is to let them land on the streets. People who are sofa surfing very often find that they have to sleep rough for a night every now and then because they've got to wait for their auntie to get back from her holiday before they can stay at her house, and that friend can't put them up because it's their turn to look after their son. And do you know what I mean? And it kind of becomes complicated, and they end up sleeping rough for a night. Generally speaking, they don't sleep; they just wander around the streets for the night. And then 3 weeks after that, they might find themselves sleeping rough for 2 or 3 nights. And then a year later, that's morphed into them largely sleeping rough, but occasionally getting a sofa. And I would say a lot of rough sleepers can get a sofa every now and then. Because they've come initially from sofa surfing, where they were mostly sleeping on sofas.
Would you say that's one of the main routes into rough sleeping?
Yeah, certainly
just
amongst
kind of losing your job or something like that, or even just losing your accommodation and then trying to make it work at friends' sofas, and that slowly turns into.
Yeah, people can get just, if you're sleeping on sofas and you're dancing from friend to friend, and you might be dancing from town to town, because your next friend might be in Bodmin, and the friend after that might be in Penzance. You're not going to be able to hold a job down. You're probably not going to be able to hold college down. You're probably not even going to be able to hold your benefits down if you're on benefits, because you've got to sign on every fortnight at a particular job centre. And the day you're due to sign on at Newquay Job Centre, you're sleeping on a friend's sofa in Penzance, and you've got no way of getting back here because we've got the communications system, the transport system in Cornwall is at times it's not very good, because if you want to get from, say, Bodmin to Newquay, or you've got to change at Column Major a lot of the time. If you want to get to Bodmin to Truro, it's the same, and it involves hanging around, those 2 bus stops in Column Major, where there are, as far as I'm aware, no sort of newsagents, or I'm not sure if there's a public toilet nearby. There might be, but if you're doing that in February, and then you've got to get back again as well. It's costing you money to do that. It's really difficult for people to hold anything down, and that then results in them ending up with no money and no prospects, and their mates are going to get really tired of them. They're going to say, well, you're nicking all my cornflakes, you're not washing your socks, you're laying on our sofa with your stinky feet all day, feeling miserable. We're getting a bit tired of it. And it begins to, and of course their self-esteem will suffer as a result of all of that. And if you put yourself in their shoes, and so suddenly now they're largely sleeping rough, having gone through all of this with all of their mates. And you imagine if you were that person and you were walking along, Bank Street in Newquay, and you saw a friend or a group of your friends, and I asked the school children this when I do the school talk sometimes, what would you do, And they largely say, I would dart into a shop and I would hide behind one of the shelves because I'd be so embarrassed about my situation. And that's what happens, they're completely estranged they've estranged themselves really from their friendship groups, because they're so embarrassed about what's going on.
And then I guess if you've got, if you're not really connected with your friendship group, you haven't got a job, and you're not got somewhere to live, it can be quite easy to find or seek some kind of escape through drugs or alcohol.
It's about connection, in my opinion. We, as human beings, we need connection with something, and loneliness is a real problem, certainly amongst certain groups in our society. It really is a horrible thing for the people who are suffering from loneliness. A lot of homeless people they're not connected to their old friendship groups, and we can develop connections to other things, and people can start a friendship or a love affair with alcohol or a substance, which, because they lack any other connection, becomes huge in their life. And if heroin or alcohol or cannabis has become the love of their life or their best friend, then they're in trouble.
That's I think quite a nice way of putting it that I hadn't heard before.
That is, and to get someone off of heroin or cannabis or alcohol, they first got to come off. With cannabis, it's just a case of them having to stop, and they may, they're going to miss it for a period of time. It doesn't cause any physical issues, just coming off it, but they are missing their best friend, or they're missing the love of their life, or the current love of their life. If they're coming off of heroin or alcohol, then there are physical aspects to the to withdrawal, and if they're coming off alcohol, it's particularly dangerous, because if someone who's dependent on alcohol, physically dependent on alcohol, if they don't get the alcohol they need, then they can have a fit. It's like a seizure, a bit like an epileptic fit. It's not the same as an epileptic fit, but it's and they literally keel over in front of you. And I've been there when it's happened, and their lips go blue and their tongue goes blue. Sometimes they're writhing around on the ground. They're not conscious. Sometimes they're just still. If they swallow their tongue, then it's bye-bye. If they do that and crack their head open on a radiator, then that's clearly very serious. And alcoholic seizures can be fatal. So the only option for someone who's dependent on alcohol is to get them into a medical detox. We have a doctor who works for, we've got the Health for Homeless, they're called. So they're their own practice, a practice in their own right, and they work out of Breadline in Penzance, they work out of Truro, and they work out of Coastline in Camborne. And they are experts. So they will occasionally be able to work with someone to reduce their intake of alcohol. People can come off of alcohol by reducing their intake gradually. But for someone who's living on the streets, that's a tricky ask. There's home detoxes where people can be given the medication they need to come off of alcohol at home. There's medication you can get which prevents the fitting, but it's a strong sedative, so you can't give them too much if they're on the streets, because someone who's sedated and sleeping on the streets is very vulnerable. So really, if someone's on the streets and they're dependent on alcohol, they've got to go for a medical detox, and that can take some organising and a wait. And while you're waiting, everything's getting worse all the time, you know.
Do you feel like, back to that idea of connection, that that's where the kind of community needs to play a bigger role in tackling the issue of kind of homelessness?
Well, that's around looking at the person's assets, if you like. Okay, they're not going to have any capital assets necessarily or possessions, but they might actually be really good at computer programming or website design or car mechanics or retail work. They could be good at many different things, and where the community can possibly help is by offering opportunities to people, appropriate opportunities, and those are, it might be that we can say, have a go at something for an afternoon. If you're good at car mechanics, then we know a car mechanic in Newquay or wherever it is, and he'd like to,
Is that something that St Petrocs does now? So, builds links between local businesses and...
It's something that we do on a very informal basis. So, for instance, Sue up at the house, while she's sitting in the garden talking about the weather with someone, they're going to say, years ago I used to be really good at cars. I used to do cars up, and and she would say, oh right, perhaps I can, contact, my mate who runs a garage, or someone else who works at St Petrocs knows so and so who runs that place, and then we'll try and fix up a little opportunity for them, But I think there's room to do that more formally.
That's what I was just about to ask. And other projects that I think I've seen around the country, maybe like businesses run purely with people who have lived on the street at some point, or addicts, or other kind of where that's almost the... there's one in towards Truro, I think.
A business who runs...
A business run, by people who are out of work and on benefits, or something like that. I forget the name of it.
It's not Chaos Cafe, is it?
Chaos Cafe,
Cafe, right, yeah. So, they'll offer opportunities. Obviously, cafe-based opportunities to people who, may have, not necessarily homelessness issues, but any other kind of issue. And we do some stuff with Chaos. And they have worked with some of our clients, so I hope they still do it. But when I was managing resettlement, I organised for them to come in once a fortnight and speak with our clients, and offer any opportunities that they could give to the clients who are accessing. I thought that was such a great idea, and I think they have
maybe a hairdresser's now as well, and
the hairdressers come in and cut everybody's hair once a fortnight.
Yeah.
So 1 week we have the chaos workers coming in who can do assessments with clients and potentially offer them funding or opportunities in various places. And then the alternative week, the hairdressers come in and do everybody's hair. Cool. And then aside from that, on top of that, we've had dog groomers and, there's IT classes and all sorts of things going on to try to bring people out of their shells and find out what's good for them.
Do you think that's one of the better ways of kind of ending homelessness and supporting that group of people? It's
one way.
Yeah.
And there's obstacles and there's opportunities. So what you need is 200 different offers, as it were, because everybody's good at something, aren't they? But if somebody's good at dentistry, I say that only because I've been to the dentist this morning, or something connected, dental receptionists, that's what they've been in their past. Then you kind of need that on the table, as well as car mechanics, as well as IT, website design, sound engineering, gardening. So you add all these, you sit there and think of a list of professions or things that would offer people opportunities, and you're going to end up with a very long list. And then we've got the obstacle to that is the scale of opportunities in Cornwall versus the geographical spread. So whatever we do in Cornwall, we've got to get people from one place to another. So it may be that you can identify a catering opportunity somewhere that suits a particular individual, but that individual's in Truro and the catering opportunities in Callington.
Yeah. And it's not easy to get from A to B in Cornwall.
Whereas if you're operating in London, then it's a lot easier to match people up with what's going on, So that's the problem. And what I would like to do is just to engage businesses in a more formal way, and get them to perhaps give opportunities. And we wouldn't just say, we've got Fred or Angela and they're still using heroin and we want them to work in your factory or your workshop for a day. It would be about planning the whole thing properly so that they were going to turn up on time and that they weren't going to actually cause harm to a particular business, and it would be of benefit to Fred or Angela in as much as it would be good for the community that was offering that opportunity. And you'd want it to work for everybody, not just for us, because it'd be very easy for us to go, we've offered that person this and we've offered that person that, and then we could write a rather glossy report saying how good we are, when in fact behind the scenes everybody's really unhappy because Fred had an argument with the workshop that he was working in, and Angela didn't do very well in her hairdressing thing because she
she's not a hairdresser.
She's not actually a hairdresser. So, it's very easy to kind of try and claim credit for things and to make it work properly. So, you end up forming a relationship with a business who will say, yes, we would love to offer, this opportunity for people. But it can be a year before you find the right person for that opportunity, because whilst we did deal with 1,000 people last year, that 1,000 people is spread quite thinly over Cornwall. And to have someone who wants that opportunity and they're in the right place, it means that person who's offered the opportunity and ends up thinking, well, what's St Petrocs playing at? Because I've offered them this and they haven't actually taken me up on it yet. And it makes us look like we're not thinking about matching it up. But in fact, we're trying to match these things up.
I assume that they'd understand that, wouldn't they?
They do. And we're very lucky that they do.
If St Petrocs is moving towards this goal of kind of ending homelessness, forming relationships with business being one kind of route forwards, what are the other kind of like things that as an organisation you're kind of moving towards and looking to achieve over the next few years?
Well, obviously what we're doing is we're trying to help the people who are homeless currently, and we're trying to get those people.
Is that by rehab, like trying to get them into the houses, or?
Yes, I mean I have a colleague called Babs. She's an outreach manager, and she uses the phrase, we chase beds. That's kind of our what we're doing really. We're chasing beds. So we've got our own beds, but we're aware that other people have got beds as well. So the private rented sector, clearly there's private landlords out there, and there are other agencies out there who offer a raft of different opportunities to different individuals. So it's about trying to get people off the streets. The campaign is Let's End Street Homelessness in Cornwall. It's about helping those people. Now, there's a rough sleep account which happens every year. 2 years ago, we counted 99 people on the streets in Cornwall. But that is only a snapshot of the people who were rough sleeping on that particular night. The following year we counted 68, so everybody shouted from the rafters that the numbers had come down, and then the last count we did was 53. But it's not a true reflection on the amount of people that are coming through.
Yeah.
So it's just the people who are homeless on that particular night. So if I haven't got figures for Newquay in my head, but I can tell you about Penzance. Last year we had 132 individuals rough slept in Penzance, but never more than 30 at a time. So if we counted, and I think we probably counted about 25 in the count, because that's how many were on the street on that particular night. It doesn't reflect the amount of people who actually did rough sleep throughout the year.
I just think it's amazing that like in one of the richest countries in the world, there's still that many people rough sleeping. Like it seems like it's such a failure of our community to have people in such a bad place.
Well, it is. If you see a long-term rough sleeper, and they use the word entrenched. I've also seen the word stock, which jars a little bit. And someone who's a long-term rough sleeper with long-term addiction problems will nearly always have some sort of trauma in their childhood. That's the bottom line is that they've got some sort of enormous trauma in their childhood. There's a document that the Cornwall Council have published, and it's aimed at, it's all to do with the strategy around children, schools and families. One vision, and you can look at it online. And in that document it states that there are 8,000 children living in Cornwall currently who are living in households where domestic violence is taking place. And that there are 3,000 households visited every year by the police for domestic violence incidents where there are children present in that house.
Wow.
And they are tomorrow's entrenched rough sleepers. So in my view, part of our campaign, Let's End Street Homelessness, is not just about getting the homeless people off the streets, but it's about raising awareness around issues like that, because they the flow of people onto the streets will not stop until you begin to address those issues. And I hope that the One Vision strategy that Cornwall Council have got, that Cornwall's got, it goes some way to addressing those issues, and they've certainly highlighted that as an issue.
Do you work with other organisations that support domestic violence, or?
If we're working with a client who's a victim of domestic violence or a perpetrator of domestic violence, then we'll be working with the agency concerned, or we'll be trying to link them in with the relevant agency. So whereas and we deal with their housing, and we're quite sort of largely very blinkered about that, not in a negative way, but we deal with housing. So if someone's got an issue around something else, and whilst we do have a small drug and alcohol wing to our work, which is called Freshfield, the majority of our clients who've got a drug or an alcohol issue are linked in with an agency called Add Action.
Okay.
Add Action are commissioned by Cornwall Council to work with anybody with an addiction issue here in Cornwall. So, whilst we are concentrating on that person's housing, Add Action are concentrating on that person's addiction issue. The mental health services or the doctor are concentrating on the mental health issue. And there might be 4 or 5 things going on, and all of us are working together and communicating together to try and do the best thing for that one person. When I was a young persons worker, we used to, there was a thing called the Common Assessment Framework and the team around the child. So you would develop a team. If someone's under 18, then they're legally, the Children's Act says they're a child. So you might be dealing with a 17-year-old person who's rough sleeping, or they might be sofa surfing. And they might be looking like they're going down the wrong path here. They're not doing very well at college. And the team around that person consists of the college, consists of a drugs worker, consists of us who are doing the housing. And you meet up regularly and you contact each other. And hopefully that team works around that individual to help them through the maze that they're trying to negotiate, really. And it is a maze. And some people have got lots of willpower and lots of capacity to see themselves through that maze with very little help. They might just need to come to you because they're saying, Dave, I think I found somewhere I can live. I just need to get 400 quid together to get a deposit, and I don't know how to do that. So I can then sit down with them and help them to, apply for 400 quid from somewhere to get them a deposit. And that might be the only thing I do, And but I'm also aware that there's someone else concentrating on different aspects of that person's, the help that they're getting. So it's about communication between the agencies.
Yeah. Is there is there a reason why, or I don't know how to phrase this, but should there be people on the street nowadays?
Well, no, they should they?
It's a solvable problem.
Yeah.
Is that? I don't know enough about it to make that statement, but it feels like if we all, as with a lot of problems out there, if we all kind of contributed as a community and put our minds to it, that's a problem that could be solved.
It could. We've got a housing shortage in the UK. We've got a housing shortage in England, and there's a housing shortage in Cornwall.
See, I hear that, but I also hear that there's enough vacant buildings and houses to home people if they were used correctly.
Yeah, some of those are owned by people who are happy with that house being empty, and there's not much you can do about that.
Yeah.
The housing stock that's owned by registered social landlords, or what used to be known as council housing, it's normally pretty. They've not got many voids or vacancies going on, and where they have got a void, it's because the house is in a state of disrepair, and they can probably quicken the repairs. It takes a while, doesn't it, to get a pothole mended, let alone a house. So yes, I think there's a very big case for sorting out some of the empty properties that are out there.
Does it need more housing? Is that one of the main issues? Is that there's not enough beds for you to refer people to at the moment?
It's down to the wider economy, isn't it? So if you've got a housing shortage, if there's a shortage of tomatoes, then the price of tomatoes goes up. If there's a shortage of housing, the price of housing goes up, and that's why we see a house that was worth £100,000 15 years ago is now worth £200,000, £250,000. Rental prices increase because renting becomes more popular, because the house prices have risen up and people can't afford the deposits, people can't afford to buy a house. Therefore, the rental prices of flats and housing goes up, and the people who get squeezed out of the market are those who can't afford the rising prices. So how do you solve that in an economy which is quite rightfully a free economy? If you start putting legislation on that those houses can't be worth more than X amount, then suddenly you've not got a free economy anymore, and you're living in a state which doesn't have a free economy, and that's not the free world. So you need somehow to solve the housing problem, but on top of that, you need to solve people's personal problems, which have come about because of their unstable childhoods, and they're the vulnerable people that get squeezed out of a market which is under pressure.
Yeah, it seems like everything's stacked against a certain type of person and stacked for people that already have money. If you have money and stability, then you have power to charge higher rents or whatever. You have the freedom to do certain things. Whereas if you're living in a not such a nice place, then you're probably the one paying the rent firstly. And I think the way the rental legislation is set up in England, most of the power's with the landlord rather than with the person that rents the property, which I think is quite different to like some of the other European countries. Like I know in Germany, most people do rent because the person who's renting the property is in favour with the legislation, so they have the freedom to stay there for a long time. They can build a home there. The landlord can't just stick the rent up as and how they want. So I do think there's a role to play for the government, without impacting this free economy, but just making sure that it doesn't get carried away. The rights of the few are protected. The rights of the many are protected as much as the people with the existing power and money.
Everybody deserves to be protected by the law, whether they're a landlord or whether they're a tenant, whether the system's stacked or not, I don't know, but it is very easy for someone to be evicted. Section 21 of the Housing Act, I think, is says that a landlord can evict anybody who's on an assured short-hold tenancy, which most tenancies are, in 2 months. So they can give them 2 months' notice. And that might be because they're selling the house which they own. It might be because of more nefarious reasons. Maybe that person's complained about their boiler or something, and they've decided that they don't want that tenant anymore.
Yeah.
But sometimes, the tenant has proved to be an absolute nightmare of a tenant. So, why shouldn't they have the right to evict someone who's been a nightmare of a tenant? But perhaps that should have to be proved somehow. And these Section 21 notices, I think, there's room for improvement there, in that people get evicted way too easily from places. And, you see a lot of evictions taking place, which could have been prevented as well. So evictions from the social sector, where vulnerable people have been living and they've been hoarding, or they've been antisocial to their neighbours, but the help hasn't gone in soon enough, and it's resulted in an eviction for that person, and then that person ends up on the street, and they're quite hard to rehouse, because they might have a hoarding issue, they might have an alcohol issue, they might have a mental health issue, physical health issues. They've been evicted because of those issues, sometimes by the state, and then someone else has to try and get them off the streets, and then you've got to find them somewhere else to live, and the worry is about their new neighbours. What's going to happen in the relationship between them and their new neighbours, and the right support's got to go in so that the new neighbours don't suffer what the old neighbours suffered, but the client themselves also needs to be happy. If they're not happy, then they're going to start being a nuisance again. So it's a multi-rafted thing. If we can prevent those evictions from happening in the first place, so that everybody's happy, including that person and their neighbours, and the issues are resolved and the evictions prevented, then you end up with fewer problems. Part of our campaign, and it's I say it's a young campaign. It's been running for nearly 2 years, but I think it's about highlighting issues. It's about making people aware of certain circumstances where homelessness occurs, which could have been prevented in the first place. And the campaigning issue of the campaign would be about that, as well as about best practice on when you do help someone. How do you help them the best? So if someone's doing it really well in Norfolk or Manchester, let's look at the way they're doing it, and bring that in, or an aspect of that in, and bring that in as one of the things that we do here in Cornwall. You can't say that something like Housing First, for instance, there's a thing called Housing First, which is about, rather than bringing people through a system and then they get their own housing at the end of it all, it's about just saying, here's your own housing, regardless of what issues you've had, or regardless of what support you need. And that's going to work really well for some people, but it's not going to work really well for everybody. You bring Housing First in, but that's going to help. And it's the same thing going on here as well as what I was talking about with the businesses. You've got to have a raft of different opportunities and different accommodation options for everybody that's out there, and you can't just go, right, here's a house full of people with alcohol addictions, because then you end up with 8 people with alcohol addictions all living in the same house. If it's somewhere where they're all trying to be abstinent, then it only takes one of them to fall off the wagon, and they've all fallen off the wagon. Or if they're all allowed to, continue to drink in the property, and someone wants to go abstinent from alcohol, then it's very hard for them to do so if the other seven are still doing it.
You are very much a product of your environment. If you're surrounded by a certain type of people, then that's definitely going to affect your life decisions.
It can do. And when we ask the clients about that, they say, they don't want to be put into a house where everybody's got the same issue that they've got. Because it makes it very hard. It makes it very hard for them to.
Well, and it probably means that a lot of the conversation is about this, rather than almost being distracted by other things.
Having said that, there is reason to do that in certain circumstances, because some people will find it easier to relate to other people in the first instance when they move into that sort of accommodation. But you've got to have both options.
And we're back from my toilet break. Seamless. Well, I'm just quite keen to get an idea of what's a nice thing, or how someone should, if you're just walking down the street and you see people on the street, what's a nice way to approach them, or help them, or is it, because I don't know, it can be quite an awkward for myself, I feel like sometimes it can be quite an awkward situation. I don't want to assume that they need help, and they're in a bad place, but if I've changed, then I'll give it to them. Sometimes I'll stop, have a chat, get them a coffee, have some food with them, something like that, but never quite sure what's best for them, or
that's an unanswerable question.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it is really. I've never recommend anyone who's vulnerable approach someone on the streets, and that would mean children, for instance. If I'm doing a talk to some children, I wouldn't want them approaching someone, or anybody really, strangers, because that would be a dangerous thing to recommend doing. If you're comfortable, my wife saw someone on the streets the other day, and she was off in going into the baker, and she goes, do you want a pasty, mate? Do you know what I mean? On her way in, and he went, yeah, that'd be lovely, please. And she come out and give him his pasty that she'd bought for him, and he didn't seem to want to really talk all that much, but it's a case of, again, like you said earlier, it's don't just assume somebody needs or wants something. Ask them, if they want X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
You could ask them if they're getting any help or not. We always recommend that people phone StreetLink. Okay. So we have the. I can look the phone number up for you, and
you can
put it under me here. Yeah. Put it here.
I don't know if we're technically able to. We're able to do that.
I'll give you the number, and it's 0300. I know that much, and you can phone StreetLink, and they'll take various details off of you. They'll work out the nearest postcode to where you are, and then they'll email the outreach service, and the outreachers will be able to engage with that person. It may be that they already know who that person is.
Because I think there's quite a few regular, I see a lot of the same faces around Newquay, definitely.
Yeah. And we probably get 2 or 3 emails a week about each and every one of them.
Okay.
And it's handy, even if it's someone we do already know, because that person may have been in Perranporth last week, and we might be wondering where they've got to. And if the description suddenly fits, Fred or Joe or whatever his name is, and he's in Newquay, and we can catch up with him wherever he's been reported here. And it may be that, he hasn't had any credit on his phone, or he hasn't had anywhere to charge his phone, so he hasn't been able to let us know where he is, and he might be desperate to get hold of us. All these scenarios are possible. Less so in Newquay because we've got Disc and various people that he can potentially approach.
So when if there is a regular person sleeping on the street, or on the street during the day, I mean, are they there because they haven't been able to get the kind of help that they need, or they're there because they're not accepting the help, or I mean, I know every situation is going to be different.
Yeah, all of the above,
All of it, is it? Okay.
It may be, I mean, at times, we start working with someone, sometimes we can get them rehoused within 2 hours of our first meeting with them. Sometimes it might be 2 months, depending on, if they say, I'll only accept Newquay, and they may be Newquay born and bred. They may feel they have good reason to say that. Then that limits, all of a sudden, your options are limited. And you've got to wait for bed space to come up somewhere before you can get them indoors. It may be they have, some mental health issues that need addressing before the person who runs that bed space will touch them. Will allow them to move in. Or on occasion it may be that they're refusing help. Sometimes it may be that they've actually got help that we don't know about already, and that help is generally going to be from friends and family.
Yeah.
And some people will sit on the streets in the day because they can't access the sofa that they're accessing at night. They don't want to tell us about the sofa that they're accessing at night because they think that might harm their chances or put them slightly lower down the waiting list. So for all intents and purposes, we think they're a rough sleeper, but when we do the rough sleeper count, they're not there. So they've got themselves a sofa that they've not told us about. Sometimes we get people who, they've been rough sleeping for the last 3 months. They have. You've seen them at night. They're accessing breakfast services in the morning. They're accessing, everything points to the fact they are off sleeping. You're working with them. You're getting this person attached to them who's going to deal with their mental health. You're getting that person attached to them that's going to deal with their addiction problem. You've got, a housing agency involved who's going to, offer them a house or offer them a bed space when the bed space next comes up. All the plans, are converging on them being housed next week, and all of a sudden they just stop engaging and disappear because their mate has offered them a sofa for a few nights, and all the plans just crash and dissolve. And
it must be quite difficult.
And they disappear, and then a month later they're back on the streets again because he's fallen out with the mate who offered him that sofa, and he's back on the streets again, and you have to start from scratch. And the same can be true if someone goes into prison or any of those things, and that does happen. Some people are homeless because of their criminal behaviour, and that's another thing that you've got to be wary of when you approach people on the streets. The few that we do have on the streets are homeless because of their behaviour. They might be offenders. Some of them end up terrorising the other people who are on the streets. Very often, vulnerable homeless people, the main people that are perpetrating violence or crime against them while they're sleeping rough are other rough sleepers.
Really?
So, it's a complicated landscape.
So,
it's a complicated world.
What would you recommend is like a good or something that I could personally contribute, or how could I support this issue? And
well, you can go to our website, address here. We've got various information on there about how people can help. We can volunteer.
Okay.
We try to, I don't know if I've said it already, but go for people's specialities. If someone's good at a particular thing, let's use them for that. Some people are really good at just talking to homeless people, and if they're doing that, and in a building which is safe and it's safe to do so, then that's a brilliant thing to be able to do. And some people build some very trusting professional relationships with some of our guys, and they end up being the main person who's helped them out. We've got a lady called Jean who the clients just love. She's not on the payroll, and she comes in a couple of times a week, and she sits out in the back room in Truro, and she's built some really good relationships with the clients. She knows the boundaries, and when it does come to, say, for instance, I've mentioned it, the rough sleep account that we do, she's the one who finds out where they're all, which doorways everybody's in, and if somebody's rurally rough sleeping in a farmer's field somewhere or around the back of a barn, then she'll get the detailed directions to where we can go and find them that night. Obviously, the outreach service are the main contributors, but for the people who are accessing the resource centre in Truro, she's a really good person to have on board. So, as volunteers, if somebody wants to bake a cake or bring food in for the clients, then that they always appreciate it hugely. And keep on the street link, phone and let us know where people are, so that we can keep tabs on who's where, and anybody new that we may have not have known about yesterday, we'll know about. So there's various ways in which you can help, but have a look at the website as well. Yeah, and if people want to fundraise or donate, or it's pretty useful. There's a young lady in I think she lives in Newquay. She might live near Newquay rather than in Newquay, but she has organised a thing called Street Cramps, and she makes these boxes up with everything for women at the time of the month when they're going to need all the sanitary products and what have you, and she's made these boxes up, and the outreachers can keep the boxes in the back of their cars, along with some bits of food, and if they meet a rough sleeper who needs that stuff, then the outreachers can literally go, there you go, Bimini's made a box up for you. So it's and people come up with some fantastic ideas, and that's just one of them. So do you think it's a case of just energising more people to do more things like that? I think it's we need good ideas, because it feels to me like there's a quite a case of like it's been a problem that's been around for so long, and there's a lot of other issues out there in the mainstream that it's kind of almost just accepted as part of. It's like there's people on the street. That's just the way it is. Although it's escalated a lot in the last dozen years, hasn't it? Really, it's a lot worse than it used to be. It's a lot more visible than it used to be. It's a lot more in the news as a result, and people are at a loss to know what to do, and quite frankly, we're all at a loss sometimes. You've got this continual flow of people onto the streets, and just as you think you're getting there, a new batches of people come onto the streets, and it's really hard, and mixed in with that, you've got people on the streets who are also pretending to be homeless in order to try to, garner gifts, and they're begging, and they're not actually homeless. They may once have been homeless, and they might have become reliant on that income stream, or maybe they've never been homeless and they're just doing it to professionally beg. But it's a really hard thing to do some meaningful work in, and I would recommend, it doesn't have to be St Petrocs, it can be any local group that are working with homeless people, who know who's homeless and who isn't.
You named a few earlier. DISC. Yeah,
DISC, as Monica runs DISC, and they work out of the I think it's called St Michael's Church, on Marcus Hill. So they work out of there, and they run the food bank as well. So all of these, people, they know what's going on. They've got links with us already. They know who's homeless and who isn't, who's pretending and who isn't.
How, just kind of finally before we wrap up, just quite interested to know how you yourself kind of deal with working within an environment which is probably quite like emotionally stressful, and requires a lot of giving, and we've spoken to quite a few other organisations that the people themselves are quite need to take care of themselves and need to find ways of dealing with that output of emotional energy that they give every day, because they're working with people that need that support on a day-to-day basis.
Humour.
Yeah.
Our clients are full of humour. The staff are full of humour, and jokes, and around scenarios which are currently happening or have happened.
Do you find it? Sorry. Do you find it easy to move on from work when it finishes at 5 o'clock? Or?
It's rare that I don't, but occasionally, yes. And when you've had two people standing in front of you who are both homeless and both vulnerable, and you've only had one bed space, and one of them's gone indoors and one of them's still out there, then, and you go home and it's pouring down with rain, and it's blowing a hoolie, then you think about that person.
Yeah, that's going to be rough.
It is rough, yeah. And you can't wait to catch up with them the following day to make sure they're all right, and you kind of seek them out.
And is it, do you get frustrated that there is only one bed? Or, is there someone to be frustrated at? Is that the kind of the government's?
Well, you can get frustrated with someone in the moment, and you do, and there's often a few choice words which you can use to release your frustration, but whether that person's actually to blame is, they're under pressure. We all have to pay our taxes, and we don't want our taxes to go up. So that has to be borne in mind as well. I don't know what the answer is, a lot of the time.
Do you feel like the situation's getting better?
No, not really. No, nationwide, no. It's. I think that they're managing to keep a lid on the numbers rising. That's all they're managing to do at the moment. There's still a steady flow of rough sleepers continually coming onto the streets. And whilst that's happening, St Petrocs will always be a busy charity.
Thankfully there are organisations like St Petrocs.
Well, hopefully one day we won't need to exist. We're
with a big enough like systematic change, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I fear that there'll always be a need for some kind of backup plan or an organisation that kind of picks up the pieces when society fails.
Well, even if it's just preventative, but I think we should have the business model to go out of business.
Yeah. Nice way to think about it. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we should wrap it up there because I know you've got to get back to some important work. Do you want to just kind of reiterate what people that are listening can do to help you guys, and I think everyone should if they can.
Yeah, well, we always need clothes and blankets, sleeping bags.
Okay.
I think the old little wind-up radios and torches and what have you, very handy for the outreachers to keep.
And they should take them. Where should they take them?
They can take them to our office in City Road in Truro. It's opposite the vets there. Breadline in Penzance if people are down in that area. So just food, clothing, shoes, socks. That's the toiletries.
And time volunteering if they can.
Time volunteering
money if they can.
We tend to do batches. We'll recruit volunteers once every quarter, so somebody might write in and not get a response immediately, but hopefully we'll get to them when we're doing the next.
And do they need to be doing regular stuff, or is
not necessarily? No,
a couple of hours a week enough?
Well, they could do a couple of hours a month. Yeah.
What would they be doing?
Whatever it depends what they're good at.
Yeah.
If they can do, if they want to speak to the clients or give out food, then it could be that. If they're good at, IT, or something. I can't think of anything now. But if they, if somebody approaches us and, it's like what I was talking about earlier, isn't it? With the
cooking.
If somebody's a good car mechanic, then maybe they just might want to allow one of our clients to spend half a day working on the cars with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And if I know you're running a campaign at the moment, the poetry.
Yep.
One, is that still going on?
We've got a book coming out. It's going to be released at the Royal Cornwall Show.
Okay.
Our clients over the winter and the staff and the volunteers, we've all been writing poems.
Cool.
Even I wrote one. And the groups were brilliant. And we had some workshop facilitators in. It was paid for by Feast Cornwall. They paid for workshop facilitators to come in and help us all write poetry. So there's poems in there. There's joint poems where staff and clients have joined in together and written joint poems. There's poems from a competition that we ran, and there's poems by clients. So if you like poetry, it's right up your street.
Right. You should talk to the guys that run the Sprout Spoken.
Yeah.
This is another people we've chatted to before. Dickie's the guy that organises it. Run at Sprout where we had a coffee the last time we met. I'm sure they'd love to have on one of their open mic nights maybe a couple of people come along and do a
yeah, we're going to have a little series of launch events after the Royal Cornwall Show, even going into next year, and Sprout might be a place to do that.
Definitely,
yeah.
I'm sure they'd be really open for it. Maybe if someone could come down to one of the open mic nights, perform a couple of poems, and then promote the book or sell the book on the night, or just put it on our social medias and stuff like that. Yeah. And
you can access our YouTube as well.
Okay.
We've got a YouTube page now.
Not
had many hits on it yet. We've got lots of poems on there. We've got poems being read by Jenny Agata, who was in Call the Midwife and The Railway Children. She's read a poem for us. That's on YouTube. Benjamin Zephaniah, the poet. He's done one for us, and we've got poems being read by lots of different people.
Cool.
From
And that's
Cornwall.
just St Petrocs.
It's
on
us. Yeah,
YouTube.
if you type in St Petrocs YouTube, then
Okay.
hopefully you'll get somewhere near it. I'll put the address here.
Really seriously.
By magic.
I thought we had this.
Yeah. You'll be able to get there from our website, actually. So,
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming down.
All right, no worries.
Yeah. Cool. That was really interesting.
Oh, good. Thank you.